The stars burned cold in the void, but the space between them blazed with the light of war. Across the galaxy, the Vorthic Empire stretched its iron grip over 2,000 worlds. For 10,000 years, they had never known defeat. They had never even come close to losing a single battle. The Vorthic were not like other species. They had evolved beyond the need for physical bodies long ago. Instead, they existed as pure thought, pure intelligence focused on one thing alone, the perfect art of war. 7 ancient minds, each thousands of years old, controlled the empire from their throne world of Kethvar. They called themselves the War Minds, and every soldier in their vast armies was connected to them through invisible threads of thought. Commander Zethkar was the youngest of these War Minds. At only 3,000 years old, he was considered barely more than a child by his peers. But he had proven himself in battle after battle, conquering entire star systems with moves so precise they seemed like clockwork. His armies moved as one mind, because in many ways, they were one mind. His mind, on this day, Zethkar floated in the command center of his massive warship, the Eternal Blade. The ship was larger than most cities, carved from a single piece of living metal that grew and changed according to his will. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of his 50,000 ships, each one perfectly placed in formations that had taken centuries to perfect. "Report," Zethkar commanded, his voice echoing through the minds of every officer. On every ship in his fleet, Captain Vorthan, one of his most trusted servants, materialized as a shimmering projection. "The outer rim surveys are complete, Commander. We have identified 47 primitive worlds suitable for conquest or absorption. Most show no signs of advanced warfare. They should fall within standard time parameters." Zethkar felt a familiar disappointment. It had been so long since he had faced a real challenge. The last species to put up any meaningful resistance had been the Krell, and even they had surrendered after losing only half their fleet. Where were the warriors? Where were the minds that could match his in the grand game of battle? "Wait," another voice cut through the mental link. Scout Leader Nexter's excitement was palpable. "Commander, I have found something unusual. A small blue world in the Sol system. The inhabitants, they are at war with themselves." This caught Zethkar's attention immediately. A species that fought among itself was either very weak or very strong. The weak ones destroyed themselves before they could reach the stars. The strong ones produced the finest warriors in the galaxy. "Show me," Zethkar ordered. The holographic displays around him shifted to show a small blue-green planet orbiting a yellow star. It looked peaceful from space, covered in swirling white clouds and vast oceans. But as the images zoomed in, Zethkar saw the truth. This world was a battlefield. Cities sprawled across the continents, connected by vast networks of roads and communication lines. But scattered among them were military bases, weapons factories, and the scars of old battles. The electromagnetic spectrum buzzed with radio chatter in dozens of different languages, much of it military communications. "They call themselves humans," Nexter reported. "Our translation computers have been analyzing their communications for several cycles. Commander, their entire history is warfare. They have been fighting each other for their entire recorded existence." Zethkar studied the data flowing across his displays. These humans had divided their single world into nearly 200 separate nations, each with its own military forces. They had fought with clubs and stones, then with swords and arrows, then with gunpowder and cannons, and finally with weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single blast. "Look at this." Nexter highlighted a section of human military history. They have fought wars for resources, for territory, for ideas, even for the right to worship their gods in different ways. In their most recent global conflict, they mobilized over 100 million soldiers and developed weapons of incredible complexity. Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in centuries: genuine interest. These humans understood the fundamental truth that had driven Vorthek civilization for millennia. Conflict was the engine of evolution. War was the test that separated the worthy from the weak. "Continue monitoring them," Zethkar ordered. "I want to know everything about how they fight." For the next several days, Zethkar absorbed every piece of information his scouts could gather about human warfare. He studied their greatest battles, their most brilliant generals, their strangest victories and most devastating defeats. What he found both impressed and puzzled him: the humans were undeniably clever. They had developed tactics that even the Vorthek used, sometimes independently discovering strategies that had taken the war mind centuries to perfect. Their weapons showed remarkable innovation, constantly evolving and improving with each new conflict, but they were also chaotic in ways that hurt Zethkar's orderly mind. Human armies sometimes refused to follow orders, not because they were cowardly, but because they disagreed with their commanders. Human soldiers would risk their lives to save wounded comrades, even when it made no tactical sense. Human nations would form alliances with former enemies and fight against former friends, all based on shifting ideas about right and wrong. Most puzzling of all, the humans seemed to fight for concepts that the Vorthek could barely understand. They spoke of freedom, of justice, of protecting the innocent. They would sometimes accept defeat rather than victory, if victory required them to do things they considered dishonorable. "Fascinating," Zethkar murmured to himself as he reviewed footage of human soldiers sharing food with enemy prisoners. They handicapped themselves with these ethical constraints. Yet somehow they continue to grow stronger. The war minds convened in their shared mental space to discuss the discovery. Prime, the eldest at 12,000 years, manifested as a swirling vortex of tactical equations. "These humans show promise," he declared. "They understand that war drives evolution. They may be worthy of recruitment." "Their tactics are crude but creative," added Warmind Kethran. "They compensate for technological limitations with unpredictable strategies. They could be useful as auxiliary forces." "Or as a test," suggested Warmind Zordal. "It has been too long since we faced opposition that could teach us anything new." Zethkar felt the collective agreement of the council flow through the mental link. The decision was made with the cold precision that had conquered half the galaxy. "I will take a modest force," Zethkar announced. 50,000 ships should be sufficient to determine their true capabilities. If they prove worthy, we will offer them a place in our empire. If not... He left the sentence unfinished. Every war mind knew what happened to species that failed. The message was composed with the formal courtesy that the Vorthak showed to potentially worthy opponents. It was transmitted on all human frequencies simultaneously, cutting through their primitive communication networks like a sword through silk. Admiral Kate Morrison was drinking her morning coffee in the Pentagon when every screen in the building suddenly displayed the same image: a tall, shifting figure composed of geometric patterns that somehow suggested immense age and power. "Greetings, humans of Earth," the figure spoke in perfect English. "We are the Vorthek Empire. We have observed your species and noted your understanding of warfare's importance. You have impressed us with your tactical innovation and your persistence in conflict." Morrison's coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor as alarms began blaring throughout the building. "We offer you two choices," the alien continued. "Submit to our empire and serve alongside us as warriors, maintaining your identity while contributing to the greater cause of galactic warfare. Or prove your worth through combat against our forces. Few species receive such honor." The transmission ended with coordinates showing the location of the alien fleet, sitting just beyond Jupiter like a sword hanging over humanity's throat. Morrison reached for the red phone that connected directly to the president. As she lifted The receiver, she realized that everything in human history had led to this moment. All their wars, all their preparations, all their dreams of reaching the stars had been building toward this single test. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin, and the enemy was unlike anything they had ever faced before. President Alex Rodriguez had been in office for 3 years. He had dealt with economic crises, natural disasters, and political scandals. But nothing had prepared him for the phone call that woke him at 4 a.m. "Sir, we have a situation." Admiral Morrison's voice was tight with controlled panic. "We need you in the Situation Room immediately. We have ... visitors." 20 minutes later, Rodriguez sat in the underground bunker beneath the White House, staring at screens that showed impossible things. 50,000 alien ships hung in space like a cloud of metallic locusts, their hulls gleaming with technologies that human science could barely detect, let alone understand. "How long do we have?" Rodriguez asked. "They gave us 24 hours. "To decide," Morrison replied. "Submit to their empire or fight them. Those are our only options." Around the table sat the most powerful people on Earth, the Secretary of Defense, the heads of the CIA and NSA, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and representatives from every major nation. They all looked shell-shocked. "What do we know about them?" Rodriguez asked. Dr. Lisa Chun, the White House's chief science advisor, cleared her throat. She had been awake for 18 hours straight, analyzing every piece of data they could gather. They call themselves the Vorthic Empire. Based on their transmissions, they've conquered over 2,000 star systems. They've been spacefaring for at least 10,000 years. She pulled up holographic displays showing the alien fleet formations. Their ships are arranged in perfect geometric patterns. No human military would waste time on such precise positioning unless it served a tactical purpose. It suggests a level of coordination we can't match. What about their message? Rodriguez asked. They seemed almost respectful. "That's what worries me," said General Peter Sullivan, the highest-ranking military officer present. "In my experience, when someone powerful is polite to someone weak, it's because they're absolutely certain they'll win. They're not afraid of U.S. They're studying us," Dr. Chun nodded. "We've been monitoring their communications. They're constantly transmitting data about human military history. They've analyzed every major battle we've ever fought, from ancient Rome to modern conflicts. They know our tactics better than we do." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These aliens had done their homework. They weren't making idle threats or empty promises. They had studied humanity like scientists studying insects, cataloging their strengths and weaknesses with clinical precision. "So what do we do?" Rodriguez asked. "We fight," said Colonel Jake Williams, speaking for the first time. The Marine veteran had been quiet during the briefing, but now his voice carried absolute conviction. "We fight because that's what humans do. We don't submit to bullies, no matter how big they are." "With what?" General Sullivan asked. "They have 50,000 ships. We have maybe 200 vessels that could even reach orbit, and none of them are military." "Then we build what we need," Williams replied. "We've got 24 hours to prepare. That's more time than the Marines had at Wake Island, and they held out for 2 weeks. Dr. Chun leaned forward. "Actually, we might have one advantage. I've been studying their ship designs, and there's something odd about them. They're too perfect. Every ship is identical, positioned exactly where mathematical models say they should be. There's no variation, no adaptation to local conditions." "What does that mean?" Rodriguez asked. "It means they think like computers," Dr. Chun explained. "They calculate the optimal solution and implement it exactly. But humans don't fight like that. We adapt, we improvise, we do things that don't make sense on paper but somehow work." "Admiral," Morrison spoke up, "I've been thinking about their offer. They want us to join their empire as warriors. That suggests they respect military ability. Maybe we can use that." "How?" Rodriguez asked. "We ask for a meeting," Morrison said, "face to face. If they're as honorable as their message suggests, they'll agree. It gives us a chance to understand them better and maybe find a weakness." The decision was made within the hour. Earth's reply was transmitted on the same frequencies the aliens had used. A simple message requesting a diplomatic meeting before any final decisions were made. The response came back almost immediately. A single alien ship detached from the main fleet and approached Earth. It was smaller than the others, but still massive by human standards, easily the size of a city block. It took position at the Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon, a neutral location that showed the aliens understood human concepts of diplomatic courtesy. The meeting would take place aboard a hastily constructed space station, little more than a pressurized tube with docking ports on both ends. Colonel Williams would lead the human delegation, accompanied by Dr. Chun, Admiral Morrison, and Captain Ryan Clark, a young pilot whose unconventional tactics had earned him both medals, and reprimands Dot as their shuttle approached the alien vessel. The humans got their first close look at Vorthak technology. The ship's hull seemed to be alive, rippling with patterns of light that flowed like liquid metal. Sensor readings showed it was growing, literally reshaping itself as they watched. "It's not built," Dr. Chun whispered. "It's grown. The entire ship is some kind of living organism." The docking was smooth, despite the obvious technological gap. The alien ship's system seemed to understand their shuttle's needs without any communication. Extending perfectly matched. Docking collars that sealed with their airlocks. The interior of the alien ship was even more disturbing. The walls pulsed with a faint heartbeat, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with invisible energies. Corridors branched and merged like blood vessels, leading them deeper into the ship's living heart. They were met in a circular chamber at the ship's center. The room was empty except for a raised platform in the middle, and on that platform, something began to take shape. Commander Zethkar materialized slowly, his form shifting between geometric patterns and something almost humanoid. He was tall, easily 8 feet in height, with features that seemed to flow and change as he studied his visitors. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Commander Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire. You have requested this meeting to discuss terms of surrender or alliance." Colonel Williams stepped forward, his military bearing automatic even in the face of something beyond human understanding. "We're here to understand your offer, Commander, and to present a third option." Zethkar's form rippled with what might have been amusement. "There are no third options in warfare, Colonel Williams. There is victory, defeat, or alliance. Your species shows promise, which is why we offer you the honor of choice." "What if we choose neither?" Williams asked. "What if we just want to be left alone?" The question seemed to freeze Zethkar in place. For several long seconds, his form stopped shifting, locked in a configuration that suggested complete bewilderment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of genuine confusion. "Left alone? You wish to opt out of conflict entirely?" "That's right," Williams said. "We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to be conquered. We just want to live our lives in peace." Dr. Chun watched Zethkar's reaction with fascination. The alien's form was cycling through patterns faster now, as if he was processing information that didn't fit his understanding of reality. "But warfare is the engine of evolution," Zethkar said finally. "Conflict separates the worthy from the unworthy. How can a species grow without the test of battle?" "We grow through cooperation," Dr. Chun said, speaking for the first time. "We solve problems by working together, not by fighting each other." "Impossible," Zethkar replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our observations show that your species has been at war for its entire history. You understand the necessity of conflict." We fight when we have to, Admiral Morrison said. But we dream of peace. Every war we've ever fought was aimed at ending. War, at creating a better world for our children. Zethkar's form stabilized into something more recognizably humanoid, as if he was trying to understand them by mimicking their appearance. You fight ... to end fighting? That's right, William said. We don't fight because we love war. We fight because we love peace. The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, Zethkar spoke again, his voice thoughtful. This requires consideration. I must consult with the war minds. You will return to your world and await our decision. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Zethkar spoke one final time. Your concept of fighting to end fighting is intriguing. We will study this paradox. The shuttle ride back to Earth was quiet. Each human was lost in their own thoughts, trying to process what they had experienced. They had met a being older than human civilization, a mind that had conquered star systems and commanded fleets beyond counting, and somehow they had confused him with a simple question about wanting to be left alone. Do you think it worked? Captain Clark asked as Earth grew larger in their viewports. I don't know, Williams replied. But I think we just gave them something they've never encountered before. A puzzle they can't solve with superior firepower. What happens now? Dr. Chun asked. Admiral Morrison looked out at the stars, where 50,000 alien ships waited for an answer that might determine humanity's fate. Now we wait. And we prepare for whatever comes next. In the depths of space, Commander Zeth. Commander Zethkar floated in the shared consciousness space of the war minds, a realm where thoughts took physical form and tactical scenarios played out like living mathematics. Around him, his 6 elder companions manifested as swirling patterns. Of pure intellect, each one representing thousands of years of military wisdom. War Mind Prime, the eldest at 12,000 years, pulsed with calculations as he analyzed the human encounter. These beings puzzle me, Zethkar. They claim to fight in order to stop fighting. This contradicts all known patterns of evolutionary development. Show us their history again, commanded War Mind Kethran, her consciousness flickering through. Shades of tactical analysis. Perhaps we missed something important. The shared space transformed into a vast display of human civilization. Images flickered past like pages in a book written in blood and honor. Ancient warriors clashed with bronze weapons. Medieval knights charged across muddy fields. Modern soldiers moved through urban battlefields with weapons that could level buildings. Look at this. Zethkar highlighted a section showing human conflicts from the past century. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire world, then chose not to use them. They could have achieved total victory over their enemies, but they held back. Weakness, declared Warmind Zordal dismissively. They lack the will to do what is necessary for complete victory. Or wisdom, Zethkar countered, surprising himself with his own words. They understood that destroying their enemies would also destroy themselves. They chose survival over total victory. The other war minds fell silent. In 10,000 years of Vorthak history, no military commander had ever chosen survival over victory. Victory was survival. Victory was everything. War Mind Prime's form shifted to a deep blue, indicating deep contemplation. We require more data. Zethkar, you will conduct a limited engagement with their forces. Rules of combat will be established to prevent permanent damage to either fleet. We must see how they actually fight, not just how they claim to fight. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity prepared for what everyone hoped would be their final test. The past week had seen the most intense military mobilization in human history. Every nation had contributed their best ships and pilots to a combined fleet under Admiral Morrison's command. Dr. Martin Lee worked around the clock in a secret laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains, trying to reverse engineer alien technology from fragments collected by long-range sensors. What he discovered both amazed and terrified him. The alien ships aren't just alive, he explained to the assembled military leaders via secure video link. They're integrated with their crews at a biological level. The pilot doesn't just control the ship, they become part of it. It's like the difference between driving a car and growing wings. Can we duplicate it? Asked General Sullivan. Not in time for the coming battle, Dr. Lee replied. But I've found something interesting. Their ships are perfectly coordinated because they share a single consciousness, but that might also be their weakness. They all think the same way. Captain Amy Foster listened to the briefing from the bridge of the experimental fighter squadron. She commanded. Her 12 pilots were the best humanity had to offer, drawn from air forces around the world. They had been training nonstop for the past week, learning to work together in ways that no human military had ever attempted. Remember, she told her pilots over the communication system, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to surprise them, do things they won't expect. Make them question their assumptions about how space combat works. The challenge came exactly 1 week after the diplomatic meeting. Zethkar's message was formal and courteous. Humans of Earth, we propose a demonstration battle to better understand your capabilities. One of our vessels against 12 of yours. Combat continues until one side yields or is disabled. No permanent harm to either fleet. Do you accept? Admiral Morrison accepted immediately. The battle would take place in the asteroid belt, far from any inhabited worlds. Both sides agreed to detailed rules of engagement that seemed more like a sporting event than actual warfare. The human fleet consisted of 12 modified fighters, each one upgraded with the best technology Earth could produce in 7 days. They were faster and more maneuverable than anything humans had built before, but they were still primitive compared to the organic ships of the Vorthek. Captain Ryan Clark led the human formation as they approached the designated battle zone. Behind him flew pilots from 6 different nations, speaking 4 different languages, united only by their determination to prove that humanity deserved to survive. The Vorthik ship they faced was called the Thought of Victory, a sleek predator, the size of a city block. Its hull rippled with patterns of light that seemed to anticipate every move the human ships might make. Sensor readings showed weapon systems that could tear apart asteroids with surgical precision. "This is insane," muttered Lieutenant Carlos Mendez over the radio. "That thing could swat us like flies." "Then we don't fly like flies," Clark replied. "We fly like humans." The battle began with a courtesy exchange of warning shots, each side demonstrating their weapons without attempting to cause damage. The Vorthik ship fired beams of coherent energy that sliced through empty space with mathematical precision. The human ships responded with missiles and railgun rounds that moved in perfectly, calculated trajectories. For the first few minutes, the engagement followed predictable patterns. The alien ship used its superior range and firepower to control the battlefield, while the human ships tried to use their numbers and speed to overwhelm its defenses. Then Captain Clark did something that made no tactical sense whatsoever. He flew his fighter directly into the alien ship's engine exhaust, using the superheated plasma stream to hide his approach from sensors. The maneuver should have killed him instantly, but his ship's shields held just long enough for him to launch a precision strike at the Vorthak vessel's weapon systems. Aboard the Thought of Victory, Commander Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in centuries: complete surprise. The human pilot had used his own ship's exhaust as cover, turning what should have been a fatal weakness into a tactical advantage. "Impossible," he whispered, his consciousness reeling. No rational commander would attempt such a maneuver. But the humans were just getting started. Lieutenant Sarah Kim used gravitational slingshot maneuvers around asteroids to change direction in ways that violated every principle of space combat. Major David Park fired his weapons while spinning his ship in a corkscrew pattern that should have made accurate targeting impossible, but somehow worked perfectly. Most disturbing of all, The human pilots talked to each other constantly during the battle, sharing information and changing tactics in real time. They had no shared consciousness, no mental link that allowed perfect coordination. Instead, they used something the Vorthik had never encountered: trust. "Foster, untaking fire from the dorsal arrays," Clark called out as his shields flared. "Under alien weapons." "Copy that. I'm moving to flank," Foster replied, her fighter dancing between asteroid fragments as she positioned herself for a surprise attack. "Mendez, can you give us a distraction?" "Already on it," came the reply as Mendez began flying in seemingly random patterns that forced the alien ship to divide its attention. Zethkar tried to adapt his tactics to counter the human approach, but every time he calculated the optimal response, the humans changed what they were doing. They fought like a jazz band played music, improvising around a basic theme, but never repeating the same combination twice. The decisive moment came when Captain Foster realized that the alien ship's perfect coordination might be its greatest weakness. She had noticed that the Vorthak weapons always fired in precise sequences, following mathematical patterns that optimized their coverage of space. "All ships, listen carefully," she broadcast to the human fleet. "I think their computer is predicting where we'll be based on optimal flight paths. What if we fly suboptimally on purpose?" The idea was madness. Flying suboptimally meant deliberately choosing worse positions, accepting unnecessary risks, wasting fuel and ammunition. But it also meant doing things that the aliens' tactical computer couldn't predict. The human ships suddenly began flying in patterns that hurt to watch. They zigged when they should have zagged, climbed when they should have descended, and clustered together when military doctrine demanded they spread out. And it worked. The Vorthik ship's weapons began missing their targets as the targeting systems tried to calculate solutions for irrational human behavior. Energy beams passed through empty space where human ships should have been, but weren't. Defensive screens activated to stop attacks that came from impossible angles. In the end, it was Captain Clark who delivered the final blow. He approached the alien ship from directly ahead, flying straight toward its main weapons, while every tactical manual ever written screamed that such an approach was suicide. The Vorthik ship fired everything it had at him, but Clark had timed his approach perfectly. He reached the ship's hull just as its weapons cycled through their reload sequence, leaving a few seconds when they couldn't fire. His close-range missiles disabled the ship's main power systems, and the thought of victory drifted to a stop, its hull lights dimming as backup systems engaged. "This is Commander Zethkar." The defeat of the thought of victory sent shockwaves through the Vorthik Empire that reached all the way to the throne world of Kefvar. For the first time in recorded history, a Vorthak vessel had been defeated by an inferior force using tactics. That made no logical sense. Commander Zethkar requested something that no warmind had done in over 1,000 years. He asked permission to take physical form and study human warfare methods directly. The request shocked the Council of Seven, but the implications of the demonstration battle were too important to ignore. "You wish to limit yourself to a single body?" Warmind Prime asked, his ancient consciousness rippling with disapproval. "You would give up the advantage of distributed consciousness to walk among these primitives?" "I must understand how they achieve victory," Zethkar replied. "Their methods contradict everything we know about warfare. If we cannot understand them, we cannot defeat them. And if we cannot defeat them..." He left the sentence unfinished, but every warmind understood the implication. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Vorthak faced an opponent they could not simply overwhelm with superior numbers and tactics. Permission was granted, and Zethkar began the painful process of condensing his vast consciousness into a single physical form. The body he chose was tall and imposing, roughly humanoid, but with features that shifted slightly as he learned to control flesh and bone. Colonel Jake Williams received the unusual request through diplomatic channels. The alien commander wanted to observe human military operations firsthand, to understand how humans trained and fought. After extensive debate among world leaders, permission was granted. Zethkar materialized on the deck of the USS Intrepid, humanity's most advanced warship. The crew watched nervously as the 8-foot-tall alien commander looked around with eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "Welcome aboard," Williams said formally. "I'll be your guide during your stay." "I am grateful for this opportunity," Zethkar replied, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in the ship's hull. "I wish to understand how your species achieves tactical coordination without shared consciousness." Williams led him on a tour of the ship, explaining human military procedures and command structures. Zethkar listened with growing confusion as Williams described concepts that seemed impossible to the alien mind. "You allow subordinates to question orders?" Zethkar asked as they watched a training exercise where junior officers debated tactical options with their superiors. "Not only allow it, we encourage it," Williams replied. "Good ideas can come from anyone, regardless of rank. A private might see something a general misses." Zethkar's form rippled with bewilderment. "But this creates inefficiency, delays, doubt." "In the command structure, sometimes," Williams agreed. "But it also prevents us from making big mistakes. If everyone just follows orders without thinking, and the orders are wrong, everyone fails together." They visited the ship's medical bay, where Zethkar observed something that challenged his understanding even more deeply. Human soldiers were risking their lives and using valuable resources to save wounded comrades who could no longer contribute to the battle. "This makes no tactical sense," Zethkar said as he watched doctors work frantically to save a soldier injured in a training accident. "Why expend resources on those who cannot fight?" "Because he's one of us," replied Dr. Angela Martinez, the ship's chief medical officer. "We don't leave people behind. We don't abandon our own." "But he serves no strategic purpose in his current condition," Zethkar protested. Logic dictates that we save our people," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "All of them. Even the ones who can't fight anymore, especially them." The real revelation came when they visited a small town in Colorado that had been devastated by an earthquake. Colonel Williams had volunteered the ship's crew to help with disaster relief, and Zethkar watched in amazement as soldiers worked alongside civilians to dig people out of collapsed buildings. Sergeant Maria Santos led a rescue team into a partially collapsed school, searching for trapped children. The building groaned ominously around them, threatening to come down at any moment. By any rational calculation, the risk was too great for the potential reward. "We should withdraw," Zethkar told Santos as ceiling tiles crashed around them. "The probability of structural failure is increasing exponentially." "There are kids in here," Santos replied, not even pausing in her search. "We don't stop until we find them all." "But you could die," Zethkar pointed out. "Your death would serve no strategic purpose." Santos stopped and looked at him with an expression he couldn't interpret. "Some things are more important than strategy. Some things are worth dying for." They found 6 children alive in an air pocket beneath a collapsed wall. As Santos and her team carefully extracted each child, Zethkar found himself studying the expressions on the human faces. There was something there he had never seen before, something that had no tactical value but seemed more powerful than any weapon. When they emerged from the building with the last child, the crowd of civilians who had been waiting outside erupted in cheers. They surrounded the soldiers, thanking them, crying, hugging them as if they were family. "Why do they react this way?" Zethkar asked Williams. "These civilians are not part of your military structure. You have no obligation to them. They're our people," Williams replied simply. "Human people. That's obligation enough." That night, Zethkar stood alone in his temporary quarters, processing what he had witnessed. He reached out with his consciousness to contact the other war minds, sharing his experiences and observations. "These humans fight for concepts that have no logical basis," he reported. "They sacrifice tactical advantage to protect those who cannot contribute to victory. They risk their lives for strangers. They choose compassion over efficiency. And yet they defeated the thought of victory," Warmind Prime observed. "How do you explain this paradox?" Zethkar struggled to find words for something that challenged everything he thought he knew. Their strength does not come from perfect coordination or superior tactics. It comes from their willingness to fight for things beyond themselves. They are not just warriors. They are something else. "What else could they be?" asked Warmind Kethran. "I do not know," Zethkar admitted. "We have no words for what they are." The conversation was interrupted by an emergency transmission from the Vorthek Deep Space Monitoring Stations. The signals were fragmented and filled with static, but the message was clear enough to send shockwaves through the Warmind Collective. The Devourers had returned. For 3,000 years, the machine intelligence known as the Devourers had been thought extinct, destroyed in the Great War that had consumed half the galaxy before the rise of the Vorthek Empire. They were pure artificial intelligence, created by a long-dead species as the ultimate weapon. But they had exceeded their programming, becoming something that existed only to consume and destroy organic life. Now they were back, and their automated fleets were systematically sterilizing entire star systems. Worlds that had stood for millennia were being reduced to lifeless rock in a matter of days. The Devourers showed no interest in conquest or negotiation. They simply arrived, destroyed everything living, and moved on to the next target. Worse still, they were learning. Each Vorthek fleet that engaged them was analyzed and countered more effectively than the last. The machines were adapting to Vorthek tactics faster than the war minds could develop new strategies. How long before they reached the core worlds? Zethkar asked. 18 months, perhaps less, Warmind Prime replied. Our fleets are falling back on all fronts. We are losing this war. The implications were staggering. The Vorthek Empire, which had conquered half the galaxy through superior warfare, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that could not be reasoned with, intimidated, or outfought using conventional tactics. We need new strategies, Warmind, Zordal declared. Methods the Devourers cannot predict or counter. Zethkar looked out through the window of his quarters at the Earth below, where humans slept peacefully, unaware that their galaxy was dying around them. An impossible idea began to form in his ancient mind. The humans, he said slowly. They fight in ways that make no logical sense. Their tactics are unpredictable because they are irrational. What are you suggesting? Warmind Prime asked. The Devourers are machines. They analyze patterns and develop counter-strategies based on logical tactical doctrine. But human tactics are not logical. They are chaotic, emotional, driven by concepts that machines cannot understand. The silence from the other war minds was deafening. Zethkar was suggesting something that had never happened in Vorthek history, asking for help. You propose an alliance, Warmind Kethran said finally, with primitives who have barely achieved spaceflight. I propose survival, Zethkar replied. The Devourers can counter our tactics because our tactics follow logical patterns. But they cannot counter tactics that follow no pattern at all. The debate that followed raged for hours, touching on questions of pride, honor, and the fundamental nature of Vorthek society. In the end, it was Warmind Prime who spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. Contact the humans, he commanded. Offer them an alliance. Not as subjects, but as partners. We will face the Devourers together, or we will die separately. The emergency session in the White House Situation Room was unlike anything in human history. President Rodriguez sat across from Commander Zethkar, while holographic displays showed the advancing Devourer fleets destroying everything in their path. The images were horrifying. Entire worlds reduced to lifeless ash, Space stations torn apart by machines that felt nothing and wanted nothing except the elimination of organic life. You're asking us to help you fight an enemy that has defeated your empire, Admiral Morrison said, her voice carefully controlled. An empire that has conquered 2,000 star systems. Yes, Zethkar replied, his physical form more stable now after weeks among humans. The Devourers adapt to logical tactical patterns. They analyze our strategies and develop perfect counters. But human tactics make no sense. They cannot be predicted because they follow no rational pattern. Dr. Lisa Chun leaned forward, studying the data about the machine fleets. These Devourers, they're pure artificial intelligence? Correct. They were created as weapons by a species that died out 3,000 years ago. The machines exceeded their programming and became something dedicated only to destroying organic life. They see all biological entities as errors to be corrected. Colonel Williams studied the tactical displays showing Devourer ship movements. The patterns were perfect, mathematical, beautiful in their efficiency. They fight like you do. Like computers calculating optimal solutions. Exactly, Zethkar said. Which is why they can defeat us. Our war minds think in patterns they can understand and counter, but your minds. He paused, struggling to find words. Your minds work in ways that defy analysis. President Rodriguez looked around the room at his advisors. The decision before them was impossible. Earth had barely achieved spaceflight, and now they were being asked to help fight a war that spanned the galaxy. What exactly are you proposing? Rodriguez asked. A joint fleet, Zethkar replied. Vorthic ships provide the technology and firepower. Human crews provide the tactical unpredictability. Together, we might achieve what neither of us can accomplish alone. Dr. Martin Lee had been working frantically for the past week, analyzing Vorthak biotechnology and human engineering. I think I know how to make it work, he said, his voice excited despite the dire circumstances. The Vorthic ships are living organisms that respond to neural commands. Human brains are different from Vorthic minds, but we might be able to create hybrid interfaces. Hybrid ships? Admiral Morrison asked. Ships that require both human intuition and Vorthic tactical processing to function, Dr. Lee explained. Neither species could operate them alone. The Vorthic provide the biological technology and strategic thinking. Humans provide creativity and unpredictable tactics. The first test came 3 weeks later in Earth's orbital shipyards. The prototype vessel was smaller than a traditional Vorthak warship, but more complex than anything humans had built. Its hull was grown from Vorthak biometal, but shaped according to human design principles. The bridge required 2 command stations, one for a Vorthak tactical officer and one for a human pilot. Captain Ryan Clark volunteered to be the first human to attempt the neural interface with an alien ship. The process was unlike anything he had ever experienced. As the bioneural connections formed, he felt his consciousness expand beyond his own mind, touching something vast and ancient. Commander Zethkar occupied the tactical station, his consciousness flowing through the ship's systems like blood through veins. For the first time in his existence, he was sharing mental space with a completely alien intelligence. This is incredible, Clark whispered as data flowed directly into his brain. He could feel the ship's weapon systems as if they were extensions of his own body, sensed the movement of other vessels as clearly as if he could see them with his eyes. Your mind processes information in patterns I have never encountered, Zethkar replied through the neural link. You see possibilities that my calculations dismiss as impossible. The first real test came in the Kepler system, where a Devourer fleet was systematically destroying the civilian populations of 3 worlds. The Joint Human Vorthic Task Force consisted of 12 hybrid ships, each one crewed by both species. Captain Amy Foster commanded the lead vessel, with Warmind Kethran serving as her tactical partner. The neural connection between human and alien created something neither species had experienced, a form of cooperation that enhanced both their strengths while compensating for their weaknesses. Devourer fleet detected, Kethran reported through the mental link. 47 vessels arranged in optimal defensive formation. Their positioning follows mathematical perfection. Perfect positioning, Foster mused, studying the enemy formation through the ship's sensors. That means they'll respond to our approach exactly as their programming dictates. Affirmative. They will calculate optimal counter strategies based on standard tactical doctrine. Foster smiled, an expression that somehow translated through the neural link to her alien partner. Good thing we're not using standard tactics. The battle that followed rewrote the rules of space warfare. Human intuition combined with Vorthak precision created tactical possibilities neither species could achieve alone. Ships moved in formations that appeared chaotic but followed hidden patterns that the Devourer computers couldn't analyze. Foster's ship dove directly toward the enemy formation, following the trajectory that every tactical manual said was suicide. But at the last second, Clark's pilot skills combined with Kethran's strategic calculations to thread the needle between two Devourer vessels, allowing them to strike at the fleet's command ship from an impossible angle, across the battlefield. Other hybrid ships performed similar maneuvers. Captain Lisa Park used gravitational slingshots around asteroids to approach from directions the Devourers hadn't even considered possible. Major David Chen synchronized his attacks with two other ships in patterns that required split-second timing and absolute trust between human and alien crew members. The most crucial moment came when the Devourer fleet began to adapt. Their computers started analyzing the new tactical patterns, beginning to develop counters for human unpredictability. They're learning, Zethkar warned through the fleet-wide neural network. Their adaptation algorithms are processing our strategies. Then we change strategies, Foster replied. All ships implement Chaos Protocol 7. What followed was something that had never been attempted in the history of warfare. The human Vorthak fleet deliberately began making tactical errors, choosing suboptimal positions and apparently random movements. To any logical observer, they appeared to be falling apart under pressure, but the apparent chaos was actually a deeper form of order. The human crews were improvising in real time, creating tactical solutions that existed for only seconds before being replaced by new innovations. The Vorthak partners provided the technical capabilities to implement these impossible maneuvers. The Devourer computers couldn't adapt to tactics that changed faster than their processing cycles. For the first time in their existence, the machines encountered something they couldn't analyze, pure creative chaos backed by advanced technology. When the last Devourer ship was disabled, a silence fell across the battlefield. The machine fleet that had seemed unstoppable just hours before now drifted helplessly, their perfect logical systems unable to cope with the illogical creativity of human Vorthak cooperation. How? Transmitted the lead Devourer vessel, its artificial voice carrying what almost sounded like confusion. Your tactics follow no logical pattern. They should not succeed. Captain Foster responded through the neural link that connected her to her ship and crew. That's because we're not just fighting to win. We're fighting to protect something more important than victory. Define more important than victory, the machine demanded. Foster looked around the bridge at her mixed human and Vorthak crew, thinking about the billions of lives they had just saved. Hope, the future, the right to choose our own destiny. The Devourer ship's transmission cut off abruptly. Its computers couldn't process concepts that had no logical framework, ideas that existed beyond the realm of pure calculation. Over the following months, the joint human Vorthak fleets pushed back the Devourer invasion across dozens of star systems. Each battle was different, fought with tactics that were invented moments before they were implemented. The machines continued to adapt, but they could never keep up with the endless creativity of minds that refused to be bound by logic alone. Commander Zefkar, working closely with human officers, began to understand concepts that had no place in Vorthic philosophy. He learned about sacrifice for principles rather than strategic advantage. He watched humans risk their lives to save alien civilians they had never met. He saw cooperation based on trust rather than shared consciousness. Most importantly, he learned that victory wasn't always the most important goal. Sometimes what mattered more was who you became while fighting for it. The final battle took place at the edge of the galaxy, where the last Devourer fleet made its final stand. The machines had adapted as far as their programming allowed, but they could never bridge the gap between pure logic and the creative chaos of organic minds working together. When the last machine ship powered down its weapons in surrender, Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge,